Amityville Horror Week, night number 2. Here with Kevin Mears.
Good evening, everyone.
And tonight we're going to be speaking again with George Lutz, Lorraine Warren, and after the second hour, or after the first hour, we're going to be speaking with John Zaffis. And for those of you who missed it last night, the archive will be available tomorrow morning of all the shows so far. Actually, I was a little scared to put it up there today. I really was, Kevin. I really was, because, I mean, we literally got hammered last night. And I can only imagine what the archive's going to promote. So we'll see. But anyway, tonight on the show, we're going to be speaking with George Lutz. George lived in the Amityville Horror house for 28 days with his family until they fled in fear. And this is his first public radio interview that he has done in over 25 years, talking about what has happened at 112 Ocean Avenue, as well as the first time in radio history that him and Lorraine have actually talked together about what happened in the house. Now, last night, we had heard from Lorraine, who described a lot about what, how they got involved, what happened when they went into the house. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that. Let's bring both of them onto the show. George and Lorraine, you there?
Yes, we're here.
All right.
I'm here.
And Lee is here. George is here.
And George is here. Good. Well, I'll tell you, it's been interesting. There's some things that I've never heard before. Lorraine, I guess we can, let's start with you.
Fine.
What were your feelings, after you were inside of the house at 112 Ocean Avenue, after you had been in there and experienced, going up the steps and the feelings of the sewing room and things like that? Actually, how many times were you actually in the house?
Twice.
Okay.
I was there twice for a long periods of time. I don't remember if we went back after we were with Father Pecoraro and the dinner that night at Kathy's mother's home. I know Father never wanted Ed to go back in, but my recollection is we may have gone back in the home after that.
Mm-hmm.
The house had a far-ranging effect on you. It wasn't just a haunted home that you visited and you could leave it and find your peace. You didn't find that peace after you left that house. It seemed to continue to plague you. You didn't want to give it recognition, which is what brings it right to you.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it was just always there, like it seemed to have a way of obsessing your thoughts, so that you felt, maybe if we just take a walk along the beach, maybe if we take a ride out in the country, maybe if we go to a movie and think about something else. But it just seemed to stay. You really, really had to work at your peace of mind to find it. You really did. It was an extremely, extremely oppressing home.
Now, Lorraine, you were speaking last night about how we were going to talk about the after effects of the Amityville house. Do you think anything at all followed you home?
Oh, there isn't a doubt in my mind
Mm-hmm.
that it followed me home. First of all, that envelope that I picked up at the post office, among the other things that were in that envelope was a lot of literature about that priest, Padre Pio, who suffered the wounds and stigmata of 50 years of his life, for 50 years of his life. He was a Franciscan priest who lived in a monastery in Giovanni Rotunda, Italy. A lot of very, very beautiful things have happened as a result of him. in the way of miracles. He had the gift of discernment. He had the gift of bilocation. And he was just a very incredible person that I always regret I never met personally. And so when I opened that envelope when we got home, there was a book on his life. And I got in bed, and I had the light on, and I was trying to read. Ed had gone out to his office. Now, Lou, you're familiar with our property, and the office is on the extreme other end of our property. In other words, you have to go from the bedroom here, down the steps, into the living room, into the dining room, down the stairs, out through the passageway that goes partially underground, to the museum, and to Ed's office. That's the extreme other end of the house. So I got in bed, and at that time, two of our dogs, we had two dogs, one big dog and one smaller dog. And they were both here in the bedroom with me. Now, the bedroom is very bright. It's very cheerful. The canopy bed, the whole bit. We've been here a long time. And when I couldn't concentrate on the first paragraph of that book, I knew something was very, very wrong. Now, Ed isn't here, but all I have to do is push a little buzzer that's an in-house security so that wherever he is, it alerts him. Mm-hmm. It isn't something that isn't the same thing that we would use for police or like that.
Right.
And I began to hear the sound of like sheet metal shaking. There's no sheet metal in the house. No sheet metal at all in the house. Not even the boiler in the house. And that alerted me. And then it was like a huge vacuum is the only way I can describe what it was like a cyclone of wind or energy. And that came from the lowest level of the house, up the stairs, into the dining room. Now, I only moved my eyes. Why didn't I press that buzzer? I don't know why I didn't.
Were you experiencing, like, phantomania or anything?
Phantomania.
Okay.
Yes. And then I looked at them. I could move my eyes. The one dog was halfway under the dust ruffle on the bed. The other was over by the bureau. The hair stood right up, and they were like statues. They weren't moving, nor were they reacting. They were terrified. Then, as I looked, right in the hallway here, this huge black thing formed. I talked right out loud to Christ. Right out loud, I talked and commanded it in the name of Jesus Christ to leave and go back to where it came from. I laid here. I just laid right here on the bed. Within not minutes, seconds, Ed did not come up from the lowest level of the house. Something forewarned him. Something wouldn't allow him to come that way. Ed came out the back door of the studio, the museum there, as he started to go up the stairs. This is how he describes it. It was like animals fighting. He had a flashlight. There were no animals. He came in the kitchen door. He came through in the bathroom, into the bedroom, and laid down on the covers, on top of the covers, next to me. He put his hand on my hand and said, "Honey, you have no idea what just happened to me." Wow. And I said, "You have no idea what just happened to me." It happened to us, independent, completely independent of each other. Completely independent of each other. Me here in the bedroom and him on the furthest area of our property from this room where I am right now.
Now, at any time during your whole career, had anything like that happen in the house?
Things would happen,
mm-hmm.
but as I have said, and I probably will always say, no other case ever affected our personal lives like this case. No other case at all.
Now, George, did you ever experience anything like that?
Certainly not in the same way as Ed and Lorraine. I think that at that point they were probably considered some kind of a real threat to
mm-hmm.
who was in the house.
Mm-hmm.
When Lorraine was talking about going back to the house before, it's not my recollection that they ever went back a third time.
No, okay.
But I do remember that dinner and that Ed and Father Ray, you could call it friendly argument, but they discussed much of that day whether or not Ed should or would go back to the house at all.
That's right.
But it was pretty much by the end of the evening when he saw the light, I guess, or agreed that no, that would not be a good, healthy idea to go back and have anything more to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, that same night, at Kathy's mother's home, when Father Pecoraro set that date up for us to meet there.
Yes.
When we went in, we were told we couldn't talk in front of the children. And we knew enough not to talk in front of the children. And you remember what transpired and how Ed was getting agitated?
Oh, sure.
You remember that.
You called it a form of oppression.
It was. It was a form of oppression because it was out of character. And it was important for Ed to know exactly what happened to them in that house in their words. And yet, Ed knew that the more they would talk and discuss it, the more recognition they would give and cause themselves more problems. But all was still. Now, we're having dinner. We're not discussing the case at all. We did not have those sheets back, the proof sheets of all those photographs that were taken in the house. We did not have them back. No way whatsoever did we know anything about that one photograph that showed what appeared to be the image of Padre Pio looking at me. We didn't have anything nobody even knew about that, nothing. And there was like a stillness at dinner, and Father stood to slice the bread, the St. Joseph's bread. He looked directly at me, talk about intimidating, looked directly at me and said, "Who do you think brought you out of that house?" And I said, with all the respect in the world, "God, I guess, Father." he says, Padre Pio, right? And I said back to him, how do you know? And he said, he told me so.
Wow.
I'll never forget that, Lee. Never, never, never forget that.
Now, you know, Lorraine, you have dealt with literally tens of thousands of cases.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you have experienced things that most people would think are, you know, complete science fiction or whatever.
Yes, I guess so.
And, you know, how could you, when you talk about, you know, the Amityville case being that close to home and affecting you that much,
Mm-hmm.
and no other cases that you've ever done have come close, does that lead you to believe that there was just something just so overpowering about that house that made it unique above everything else?
Yes, it did make it very unique. That is why Ed and I, aside from our love and respect for Lee and Kathy and the family, aside from that, that's why we have always fought so hard for their honor regarding that case,
Mm-hmm.
and have become so enraged by these so-called skeptics. Who are they? What are they? What was their role? What did they have to do with the house, with the family? They read a book? You evaluate a case on a book?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it seems like it is. I mean, it seems like most of the people that don't believe it are the ones that say, well, you know, on page 211 it says this, and did that really happen? And, you know.
They want the book to be perfect. That's
Exactly.
the problem.
Exactly. And we all know that, you know, no matter what book it is, they're all not perfect.
There's literary license taken in any piece of literature, any piece of literature at all. There is some literary license
Mm-hmm.
that is taken, and it was, and there was certainly more than dramatic license taken in the movie. Had the movie actually portrayed what really happened to the Lutzes, it would have been far more terrifying
Mm-hmm.
than what they portrayed in that movie.
I think it would have been harder to understand, though, too. I think it would have been harder to translate in a movie
Well, we
accurately.
sure tried our hardest for American International Pictures.
Sure.
When not for American International Pictures, for the general public to understand what really happened in that home when we did we did more than national tour. We went out of the country too, but it's one of the most discussed cases. It's the one case that even if you try to avoid it, even today at a university, it's going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't bring it up at some part of your program, then they want to know about it during the question and answer period. But it is always something that we got to the point, I'll tell you, one thing before I forget it, we'll never discuss the case on a plane, in a car, in any mode of transportation at all.
Mm-hmm.
We will never discuss it.
Good idea. Very good idea.
Never.
Oh, man.
I don't know that I've ever thought about that way, Lorraine, but I don't think that I do discuss it at all in an airplane or...
No.
Well, I don't think it would be too much of a good idea.
Well, it stems a lot from the incident that happened in that car. Now, Ed is an excellent driver. I had stressed it last night, and he is. He's an excellent driver, always has been. And we had left a school in Pennsylvania, and a section of 84 was just like opening. It was brand new. It was real nice. And we were on the road. It was a sunny day. There was no wet pavement. There was no frost. Certainly no ice or snow was on there. And we were going along, and first we came, I always mix these up. One is the Lord's Valley, and one's the Promised Land, and I always forget what comes first. Huh. But anyway, first of all, I believe it was the Lord's Valley that came first. That was an exit. And Ed said, wow, look, hon, the Lord's Valley. And the next exit was the Promised Land. Ed made a statement. Even the Amityville Horror couldn't get us here. That was not the smartest thing to do at that given time.
No.
And when we had left our hotel room that morning, Ed's miraculous medal that he always wears was on the nightstand, and it had all knots in it. So I had it on my lap, and I was undoing all the knots in it. And I finally got the last one, and I put it over Ed's head and down into his shirt and put it on him. And it was just moments later. Now there is a tractor trailer that is a distance behind us. And he is the person who is really witness to what is going to happen. The car is brand new, and it's a heavy car, a very, very heavy car. And all of a sudden, this car starts to go out of control, and it makes the circles. Now, the truck that's behind us speaks into his radio, or his, what's their...
CB?
You know what I mean, the tractor trailers. What is it they have in there that they can...
The CB?
The CB, okay. Mm-hmm. He speaks into it, and he's relating what he is witnessing about this car out of control on the highway ahead of him. Then we hit the guardrail, and we go right over the guardrail, and we go down the embankment backwards. There's all stones down 40 feet below us. Ed, in that car, spoke right out loud to the Blessed Mother, like she was sitting there next to him. Spoke right out loud to her. When we got down to the bottom of the hill, the car was on an angle, and Ed had to kick the door open in order to get me out, and then crawl out himself. As we started to go up that embankment, there were two men standing at the top of the embankment. And the one guy said, "Is there anybody alive in that car?" And you really had to pinch yourself to make sure that you were alive. That man was the state police intelligence officer who was driving the opposite direction on 84 and heard this trucker relating what was happening. He got off the next exit and came around, and they were at the top of the hill. We thought that was the end of our car. And we got up to the top of the hill. We were all right. I mean, we were a bit shaken, but I mean, we were all right. And we waited for them to tow that car up. And we thought for sure that that car was towed. But when they pulled it up, there was a scratch, like a little dent, underneath the carriage of the car, where we hit the guardrail going over. Even these men could not believe what they were looking at. They shook their heads. We had to drive that car home that night. Our lecture for that evening was canceled. We had to cancel it. It would have been just totally impossible for us to speak that night. That's the kind of things that happen to us that have affected us to such a strange, well, more than a strange effect. It's you become aware of just how strong the personification of evil can be, and careful of the recognition that you give.
Now, Lorraine, what I wanted to add to that was, most people would say, oh, okay, well, maybe it was a coincidence, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to share something with somebody about an experience that we had, myself, you, and Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'll remember this, but we were driving back from Pennsylvania somewhere, and we had a brand new car. Do you remember that car?
Yeah.
And we were talking about the little doll. I'm not going to say the name.
No, please don't.
All right, because I have enough problems already when I say that name on the air. But and we were talking about that doll,
mm-hmm.
and we had a brand new car.
Right.
It had less than 3,000 miles on it, something like that.
It was brand new. Right.
Brand new. And we started talking about that damn doll. And you tell me what happened.
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You said it, Lou. You go ahead.
All of a sudden, we're sitting there driving. Everything's been fine. All of a sudden, the transmission just disappears. It's
yes,
like I'm not
did.
driving anymore. You remember that?
Yes,
and I'm like,
I do.
I'm like, I don't believe this. We're out in the middle of nowhere.
We sure were.
And if I remember correctly, for some odd, strange reason, after that transmission just completely died after we were talking about that,
right.
Then we actually coasted down that hill
we
for
coasted down the hill and got right off the exit.
Exactly. It was like it was meant to be.
Right.
You know what? After all of the things that have happened on the show, after naming that doll on the air, I absolutely believe that story.
Right.
So I think to all of our listeners.
But that's something right along the same lines.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
Things, and
that's what happens where recognition is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the case itself, Lee is absolutely right when he said that the reason we were affected is because of the threat that we were to what was in the house, in recognizing what was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to limit that threat to just you and Ed. I think that you had the resources, the friendships, the sources of people to organize something that, with enough people, might have really challenged its ability to stay there.
Oh, believe me, if anybody has the resources, it's Ed and Lorraine.
Right. I don't mean it I don't want Lorraine to think that I've always thought that just her and Ed could deal with it, because I think we all know better than that. But,
no, of course not.
But I think they did have in the back of their mind a game plan of something they could have put together to deal with that, and one thing would have been a mass.
Mm-hmm. And an exorcism of the home.
Yes, and that kind of idea would have been a real threat, would have been perceived as a real threat by the house. I've always considered the house at that point in time to be very intelligent.
Oh, of course. You mean what was there?
Yes, very
The house
smart.
itself was not. What was in the house was.
Yes.
Yes. And I've always found it so hard to believe unless something has been done that none of us are aware of. And we don't know that. I mean, something of a spiritual nature may have been done in that home. Because how could anybody find peace in that house? And how could you live in a home without peace? Because peace is so important. And you certainly moved in as a loving couple. And if love conquers all, it was still too powerful for you.
We were newlyweds, so...
Yes,
Then,
I know. That's for sure. That's definitely for sure. And these innocent little children, and that poor dog. How old did that dog, how old did Harry live to be?
Harry lived until sometime in 1981, I think it was, or 1980.
Oh, goodness. Wow. My goodness.
I was remembering the first night that we were at Kathy's mom's house, and everybody was kind of high-strung, and Harry was still pretty much a puppy.
Yes.
We had him tied to the piano, which was an upright piano in Kathy's mom's living room.
Yes.
And he would keep getting up and kind of turn in a circle and then lie down again. Well, by the end of the night, he had dragged the piano halfway across the room just in his sleep. Kind of just a desperation to move. And
Right.
I don't think he got over his dreams for quite a while.
No, the poor
He was pretty
dog.
unhappy. He was very happy to leave there. But
I bet he was.
he did try to hang himself the first time that we were moving. When we were moving into the house, there was a dog run there, and we had tied him to the dog run because we knew he had a rather creative ability to jump over fences. Well, he managed to jump over the fence and then hang himself on his chain, so we had to lift him back in and then shorten the chain so he couldn't do that again.
Oh, my God. Oh, good Lord.
He really was a good dog.
Oh, he was. He was a very good dog. Yes, he was. I do remember that for sure. What a very, very good dog he really was.
Now,
When we got to California and we got off the airplane, we had taken a red eye, so it arrived very early in the morning, about 4:35 a.m. And the rental car that we had ordered did not show up yet because we needed a station wagon for the luggage that we had and the kids and the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And we had taken the dog to the vet and gotten drugs for him for the flight and gotten him the biggest cage we could find that they would allow on the airplane. And American Airlines had treated him really well, but when he came out of the airport in San Diego, and he was walking across the street with the three kids holding onto the chain, he was just kind of walking sideways. I can still remember Kathy and I across the street watching the kids with the dog and just being relieved that we were there and out of New York.
I bet.
He was walking sideways. He was like a drunken dog after that flight, but he was sure happy to be back with everybody again.
Oh, God, yes.
now,
So happy to have his feet on the ground, too.
Yeah.
In a place other than New York.
what I want
I'm certain of that. And then we went out, and we stayed with you folks for a while. Now that wasn't in San Diego. That was in Mesa. Let's see. Oh, come on, Lee. I can't think of the name of the town, the village, or whatever the
Tierra
section.
Santa?
Was it?
I think we were living in Tierra Santa at the time.
No, there was some Mesa in the name. Oh, I can't. I wish I could remember, and I
We
can't
lived in La
remember.
Jolla, and then we lived in Tierra Santa, and then we lived in Carlsbad or La Costa.
Yeah.
Oh, Mesa, Arizona.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, that
But
was
no,
much
we were
later,
never.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. We were never in Mesa, Arizona. No, we were never there. You're right about. Yeah, it was in California where we were.
That would have been in 1978, 77, 78. And
Yep.
that's when we went out for dinner, and we were sitting next to a couple that he was a fisherman.
Yes.
And Lou, this is kind of off topic, but it's really not. We were sitting next to this older couple than all of us, and we got to talking with them and asked him what he did, and he was a sea captain, a fisherman that traveled up and down the coast, and his wife would travel to meet him in different cities.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him what he did while he was out at sea alone, and he said he would read his Bible, and he said that rather sheepishly, like it wasn't the kind of thing that he talked about publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to talking some more, and I asked him if he had ever seen anything out there in the ocean that he never talked about usually to anyone. And then he told us about the lights that he saw come out of the sky and go underneath the water, and then
I
come
remember
back up.
that.
And his wife was looking at him with this amazed face that this was the kind of thing he had never spoken of with her.
Yes.
For some reason, he sat there after meeting Ed and Lorraine Warren, the ghost hunters, and decided to go ahead and spill the beans on things he had seen out there that he'd never shared with anyone else. It was a very interesting night.
Oh, my God. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Ed shared back with him experiences during Ed's periods of time at sea during World War II.
Yes, that's when I first heard the story of his court-martial.
His court-martial. Yeah, right. Oh, yes, I remember that well. That ship went to Normandy, hon. That's where that ship went.
Now, what I wanted to bring up, as we get about 20 minutes or so, I want to know, and I'm sure that the listening audience wants to know, how, Stephen Kaplan got involved with this whole thing.
Oh, do we have to mention his name?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of people there that want to know exactly how he got involved with this, because
from our standpoint or from Lee's standpoint?
If both of you can elaborate on how he got involved. I mean,
all right, he got involved first with Lee before us.
Okay. George.
He was like an angry dog that wouldn't let go.
Yeah, I've seen his book. I gotta admit, it's so much of a blatant personal attack that he keeps whining is the truth. It's sickening.
But what about what Ed did? Ed was on. Ed would put that guy down so many times. I mean, some of the fabricated stories he would come up with, and finally Ed said to him, "I'll tell you what," he says. I'll tell you what, Steve Kaplan, he said, you bring all of your evidence. I want to see all of your reports. You bring them all to me, and we'll meet, and we'll do a radio show together on this. This was going to be a show they were going to do together in Waterbury, Connecticut, here.
Mm-hmm.
And he never, ever showed up. Never. Ed put that guy down so many times. He publicly apologized to us and then would turn around like some angry little dog biting at your ankles and come back again. He was something else again, that guy.
Now, George, how did
can I get in on this answer?
Yeah, I would. That's what I want to find out. I mean, how did he become involved? I mean, I'm sure he just didn't appear.
I called him on February 19th, 1976.
Right.
That was my first phone call with him, and he told me at that point about. I'm sorry, my first phone call with him was on the 17th, and he had told me that he was affiliated with the University of State of New York at Stony Brook, and that he taught there. And he gave me a number of different qualifications that he had, and then I spent some time trying to check those out.
Right.
And I called the State University at Stony Brook, and I asked them about him, and they had never heard of him. On the 18th was an article in either the Long Island Press or Newsday where he was quoted talking about the case, talking about the house.
Right.
On the 19th, I called him and I recorded the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's ever heard this conversation before, but I'll read you a transcript of it if you wish.
Sure.
Kaplan answers the phone and he says, "Oh, George, how are you?" My answer is, "Fine, how are you?" Kaplan says, "Okay," and then there's an unintelligible remark. My answer to him is, "We're going to cancel out Saturday," because we had made arrangements for him to come that Saturday and investigate the house.
Right.
Kaplan said, "Yes, I know that." My answer was, "The very last thing we wanted was any publicity, and I thought I had made that clear with you. And you went ahead and made a release to the newspapers, which is a circus." Kaplan says to me, "Which newspaper is that?" I answer to him, "It's in the papers tonight." "No, we didn't tell anyone of it, so I have no idea how it got in the papers other than through you." Kaplan's answer to me was, "Which paper is this?" My answer to him is, well, it's in the Long Island Press tonight, and it was in the Newsday yesterday. Kaplan's answer, well, it can't be through me then, because I had contact with the newspapers. They had called me. In fact, ABC. I don't know if you knew about it. ABC and Channel 5 called me. I don't know how they even got my name. But they called my organization, and they wanted an interview.
His organization. He was the organization.
Right. And in fact, ABC said they'd make me a star to come out there. And I said, no, thank you. And Channel 5, I didn't call back. And Long Island Press called me. They wanted to find out if I was indeed one of the organizations involved in it. I said no. And if we are, it will be off the record. And we're not going to discuss the case. If you want to talk about ghosts, fine. Cause, and there's a series of question marks there in the transcript, still talk about psychic phenomena to the newspapers, and we talk about cases that we've handled on Long Island. We are a known organization that does deal in psychic phenomena, so I can't turn the press down. My answer to him at this point was, well, you are quoted in the press tonight as saying you are involved in the case and that you would be working over at the house. And in the Newsday yesterday, or Long Island Press, I'm not sure which, you were quoted as saying you would be there this Saturday. The problem arises because it ends up being a circus over there, and that's the last thing that we want. Kaplan, I don't know how they got that story. It's very possible that I contacted one of my members, and maybe it happened. I don't.
One of his
I
members.
know that I didn't.
Sounds like
the biggest joke in the world.
It sounds like somebody was either smoking crack or something like that. 'Cause that's what
It wasn't
sounds
popular
like.
then. I don't know what
Lorraine?
he was smoking.
That's
a
about halfway
vampirologist.
through how this went. In the end, his remark to me is, we will pull out if that's what you wish, no problem.
So that's how it all started.
Yes.
And then, go
That's
ahead.
the last time I ever spoke to the man.
I wanted to ask you, Lorraine.
I have to tell you something before you ask me that question.
Sure.
This is weird. This is really weird. It's sad. I certainly would never have wished the man any horrible illness or death. But Ed had, let me see now, did he die in 85 or 95?
I think it was 95.
All right. So Ed had bypass surgery. Ed had the heart attack in 85. Ed had the bypass surgery. And he died. Kaplan died at that same time. Ed would always say, if he ever died during his bypass surgery and turned around and seen Kaplan coming behind him, he would always say, don't you think, Steve, that you carried this just a little too far? And in other words, if they both met at that time. But do you realize that he died quite suddenly from a heart condition the very same day that Ed had bypass surgery? Triple bypass surgery?
I had no idea of that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, he did. The exact same day he had that happened to him. So, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Lou.
No, that was Kevin.
Honest, I didn't.
That was Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's me. No, that was a very good piece of information. I don't mind being interrupted. I was going to ask if you could comment a little on some of the various titles he's claimed for himself over the years. Along with, I know he called himself a parapsychologist and a doctor, and you just had mentioned vampirologist. Is there anything else?
Ed has a whole loose leaf book, whole loose leaf folder downstairs in his office of all the things that he was not. Everything that Ed was able to prove regarding the doctorate that came from Pacifica University, which was
Mail
You know,
Non-traditional
debunked.
school without walls.
pardon?
A non-traditional school without walls is his quote.
Exactly,
Kaplan's
and
quote.
it was a debunked thing. He was a vampirologist. There's a whole thing on him. The guy worked out of a 1 bedroom apartment. Everything. That was the organization. That was the organization, this guy. And then when he finally put together this book, which I have not read, but I'm certain that Ed has a copy of it in his library, he died, I think, before it was even circulated.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, he did. But he carried on such a vendetta that it was, so extreme and so, he made some of the most stupid statements.
Oh, I know.
It was so totally unfounded. Now, one thing that I want to say before we have to cut that I think is important, and that is that it would come up, well, how did we ever document that photograph that was taken, in the Amityville home regarding the image of Padre Pio?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what had happened was when we finally got to see that photograph, I prayed to Padre Pio. I would talk to Padre Pio. I would say, if that was really you in that photograph, then I want to know about you. I want to know more about you. And if it is not, then I also want to know. And it was incredible, the things that happened. That wasn't the only time he made his presence known to us. It always seemed to happen during very controversial cases, and certainly Amityville was because of the skeptics. And then the Smurl case in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, also made his presence known there. Now, we were at a university in Dayton, Ohio, and Ed showed that photograph, I think was for the first time, and he got bad press from it. And he said he was going to take that photograph out of the presentation because the press said that Ed showed a photograph of a man who looked like a priest. But Ed did never say that it was. He did say that it did resemble Padre Pio, and it did. So then from Dayton, we went out to L.A. We lectured there to a few universities, and this one day, on a Sunday, the man's name is Joe Maggio. I don't know if Mr. Maggio is still alive, but he was an executive with one of the television studios and a close friend to Ed and I. We had met him through a very close friend in Beverly Hills. The next morning, this was on a Saturday, the next morning, he said to me, would you like to go to Mass with me at the Church of the Good Shepherd? And I said, I always wanted to go to Mass there. And so for some reason, Chuck, the man whose guest home we were staying in, this friend of ours, and Ed did not go to that Mass. And we went, and we were coming out of Mass, and nothing was mentioned about Padre Pio, because I didn't even know this man that well. He'd become a good friend, but not at that point. I really did not know him that well. And he said to me, did you know Padre Pio? And I said, I knew of him. That's how I answered. I said, why? And he said, well, there's a priest. He said, just down the coast. You're going to be speaking at La Jolla tonight? And he said, there's a priest just down the coast who served with him in Italy. His name is Father Nigre, and he's at a Catholic boys' school. just in residence there right now. So when we got back to where we were staying, to where Ed was, I called to see if I could speak to this priest. And I did. And I didn't tell him anything about a photograph. All I said is, Father, I understand that you had served with Padre Pio, and I would love to meet you. My husband and I are going to be speaking at a school not far from where you are, and we wonder, would it be possible to meet you? So he said he had an hour free that afternoon, which I don't feel was a coincidence. And he met with us, and we went in. He spoke very broken English. And at one point, Ed said to him, Father, can I show you a slide that I would like you to see? Not telling him what it was. And Ed went out to the car, got his projector, and put it in, and showed it on the wall in the area where this priest was living at the school. And he knelt down, he blessed himself, and he said, Padre Pio. And I said, Father, why would he appear to me? And he looked, and he said, you must have asked him to. And from that time on, I found out much about Padre Pio. I would find myself in situations where I was to receive his rosary beads, where I received a first-class relic of his, and all. Padre Pio has played a very, very important role in our life since Amityville.
Now, Lorraine, before we let you go, first I'd like to thank you very much for coming on and sharing everything that happened at Amityville. I do appreciate it. And, you know, I would like to say that, you know, there are many people out there, or there are people out there that believe that, you know, you guys fabricate evidence and all that. Believe that, you know, you guys fabricate evidence and all that other stuff.
No way.
No. Well, Lorraine, I know that firsthand.
No
that
way.
You don't. Okay.
We would never have been able to have a career that went over 50-some years. There is nobody that could ever poke holes in any of our evidence, any of our cases. We would never have remained university speakers for almost 34 years if we didn't actually bring the facts as they occurred and not fabricate one solitary thing.
It's true. That's absolutely true. And, you know, I know from, you know, even what I've been taught and what I've been told and what I've seen that, you know, you guys, there's no way that you fabricate anything.
No.
And, you know, you guys are the real deal. You're the best at what you do, and you're, in my opinion, you're the best in the world at investigating this and you know, bringing peace to a lot of people. So, you know, anybody out there who thinks that, you know, you guys are fabricating, it's just not true.
No, it is not.
It's
It's all based on our faith.
Yep.
And our protection. And we feel that all these years that we have been guided in doing what we do, and we have been protected because we have been doing what God wants us to do. And we believe that very strongly.
Well,
Thank you for coming on the show as well, Lorraine, from me.
Thank you very much for having me. And Lee, it was a pleasure to be on with you.
Well, I miss you. I don't want you to go away now, so why don't you just stay?
Thank you. I'll never go away, believe me.
Oh, no.
I'll never go away.
All right. Well, Lorraine, I want to thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And
Thank you, dear.
now, one other thing I wanted to mention. You know, at the lectures and, you know, and for members who join the New England Society for Psychic Research, there are these tapes about the true case of Amityville. And they were recently converted from tapes to CDs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How can people order these?
They can order them by sending it to the New England Society for Psychic Research, the NESPR, Post Office Box 41, Monroe, Connecticut, 06468, or they can go on our website at www.warrens.net.
Okay, and how much are the CDs?
20.
Okay. And those CDs that were converted from tape to CD, they're done very, very nice, professional.
Thank you.
Definitely check these out. And for further information, you can go to Lorraine's and Ed and Lorraine's website at www.warrens.net. And also there's a link on our website that will take you there. And it's definitely something that you don't want to miss. All right, Lorraine, thank you very much, dear.
Thank you. Pray for Ed.
Yeah, I always do, Lorraine.
Pray for
always
Ed.
do.
And thank you, and God bless you all.
God bless you, too.
Lorraine.
Night, night.
All right, good night. Well, George, we're going to put you on hold, and we're going to get back. Actually, you're going to call in on the other number.
Yes.
Right now. And we're going to take a short commercial. Well, actually, it's going to be about 7 or 8 minutes. So anybody who wants to go out and have a smoke and go eat or drink or whatever, go do what you got to do. We're going to be back in about 10 minutes. And, George, I'm going to hang up on you now so you can call in.
Okay. Well.
I'll just do it this way. But it was definitely a pleasure. I mean, here we had it firsthand, from Lorraine Warren and George Lutz of what really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue, how Kaplan played into this. And I think it's a very, coming firsthand from the people who were there. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that might want to write books about it, that might want to talk about it, that don't really know diddly squat about what happened at the haunting at 112 Ocean Avenue, which is the Amityville Horror. So, I mean, you might as well listen in while we talk more with George Lutz, and we're going to be bringing on John Zaffis when we come back to the Lou Gentile show. And also, I wanted to mention this, that I'm going to be having the announcement of what I'm going to be appearing at, which is going to blow your mind. It's going to tick a lot of people off, too, probably. Some people, anyway, the people that hate me. But there's a big event that I'm going to be a part of. I was asked to go out there and hold a lecture and interact and be part of with the celebrities and the whole 9 yards. So stay tuned. You'll find out more about that when we return to the Lou Gentile show right after this. I think about half of everything is out. I don't know. If you're just tuning in and you're hearing me, I don't know where this is going, how far this is going to last, how long it's going to last, I don't know. But basically what had happened is we were speaking with George Lutz, and we got a caller, and the caller, I don't know, I guess was asking him something about something in the house. And George just got ready to start talking about it, and then boom, everything went out. Everything.